Hey everybody, it's Dave, back with another drawing video. So today I'm going to spend some time talking about composition and specifically the rule of thirds. This is going to be the first of several, if not many, composition-focused art tutorial videos. I know that it's probably the element that people spend the least time considering when putting together images. I do see a lot of compositional problems, especially with amateur artists, and so I think this is something that everybody would do well to spend more time considering. It's a little bit less exciting, than figuring out how to draw the face and focus on, making a pretty eye and all of that. But what I can tell you is that composition is at the very foundation of every element of that. Drawing an eye that looks beautiful it's really not quite as important to know how to draw an eye than it is to know how to arrange that eye in a pleasing way on a page so that it does look appealing to the audience. So I want to describe to you a bit about what the rule of thirds is. And the reason that I'm starting with the rule of thirds is it really is probably the easiest element of composition to understand. And so I think it's a great place to start. So what I've got on my screen here is a document that is broken up into 9 equal rectangular shapes, and these are created by 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. And so basically this image is divided up into thirds. Okay, there is something about the number 3 that seems to create it just lends itself to interesting compositions, and when you break something up into pieces like this, what you get is the opportunity to create a very harmonized, balanced image. And to be honest, I don't know what the exact reason is for it, but I do know that when you put a focal point of your image at one of these 4 cross sections, which I'll indicate here with red dots, this is a great way to orient your images and bring a focal point to the attention of the viewer in a very pleasing and balanced fashion. And so what you want to do is place your focal point within the image at one of these points, roughly. It doesn't have to be right in perfect alignment. And also let me tell you that this is not a rule. I don't really believe in rules when it comes to art. There are things that we know that work. And this is one of those things. The rule of thirds, I think, will always help you produce an interesting image. One of the ways that we get some of the most creative and innovative images is by people breaking these rules and trying new things. But what I can tell you is that if you want to make a composition that is pretty much guaranteed to work, it's very simplistic, in a very simplistic way. It's work with the rule of thirds and put your subject within one of these rough areas of the image. So I'm going to show you some examples of this applied to my own images. Okay, so this is a spread from Dreamside, and I'm going to show you something that I do that is a little bit, I guess it kind of expanded upon this idea. So within this image, I've got my third breakdown, just the same as I just showed you. So if we look at the lines, you can see that within the entire, and this is what I want you to focus on, the entire composition here. Don't look at individual pieces. Consider the whole spread as I'm describing this. Now you can see that I've placed Sarah and the IV pole and her roblotoid and the edge of her bed here. There's a little bit of light down here. All of that is roughly arranged in this lower left quadrant, and although she's a little bit above the point here, it still has her generally in the thirds. Now, one of the reasons that I am sort of forced to move her up a little bit is that I needed room for the text. And text does make this a little bit more difficult because you're not just considering the images if you're doing an illustrated book or comic. You have to also figure out how to put the text in there. But you can see that I put her here, but you also notice that she is aligned with this third vertical line. So even though I don't have her exactly in the point, there's sort of this nebulous focus here. I would say the focal point on the left here is right here with her face. It is aligned with the vertical third. Okay, so if I pushed her a little bit to the left here and she was in the center of this image, it would be a much less interesting composition, and the same if I pushed her over to the right. And of course I have to consider the center of the page for the binding, which tends to get a little bit lost in books. But at the top left point, I've got her mobile that is hanging from the ceiling. Okay, and so the two of them sort of work harmoniously together. Then over on the right, you can see that I have her hand with a pen exactly right on this upper right intersection. Okay, and you'll notice that her face, which is a little bit to the left, is looking at that direction. So this is really where our attention is going to be most comfortable within this general area here of the upper right. And you can see that by having a focal point here and a focal point here, the two work harmoniously in a similar way that the mobile and Sarah work on the left side of the page. Okay, and then similarly, when we get to the bottom right, again, it's pushed a little bit to the right because I do have these two images, but roughly speaking, this point of interest is in the lower right intersection, just nudged a little bit. But I want to show you something else and elaborate on something I do within these images that goes a little bit beyond this. I don't just have a thirds breakdown for the entire composition. I also have a third breakdown on a page-by-page basis. So I do consider each half of a spread, so a single page, to be its own composition within the overall composition. And in fact, and this is something I'll elaborate on more in the future, I have thirds breakdowns within individual sections of each image. So it gets very complex, and when you mix it with something I'm going to elaborate on in the future, which is leading the eye direction in general, you can end up creating some very strong, effective compositions. So if you break these images down further, for example, and I focus on looking at each page, you can see I still have her hand, which is this whole part here is a very important focal point. That works within the thirds breakdown of the right page. And then you'll notice that I have the block of text occur on this upper right intersection, and the image of the dream girl is in the lower right quadrant here at this intersection. All right, and similarly on the left, you can see that the roblotoid is roughly in the lower left intersection, but by adding this blanket, which points downward, it does sort of keep the eye moving around in this general area here. And the mobile does sort of touch down where the intersection occurs. And this section here where the bed has sort of this kind of harsher edge where it intersects with the lighter projection of light from the window, that becomes a focal point as well. And of course, Sarah still remains within the vertical line. Okay, and now I want to show you another composition as well, and you can see how it works within a completely different composition. So once again, I've got the basic thirds breakdown. I have Sarah, once again, she is not exactly in one of the intersections, but her body falls directly along the left vertical. But this, of course, is where you really see sort of a nice placement with the intersection is in the upper right, where Sarah has a close-up of her head. One of the reasons, though, I mean, maybe I could have pushed Sarah's body down further and have this just be a shot where I see her head down toward this intersection point. But if I did that, I would lose the description of her body, which I really wanted to have. You'll notice that I have 4 size variations of Sarah within this image. One small one here, one in the lower right that's a little bigger, then I've got the full body here, and then I've got a close-up of her face. This balance there's so many things to consider, and I don't want to get off track here, but I'm trying to explain why I don't always obey the rule of thirds in every case. There's much more to consider. And this spread in particular has a very strong eye direction. It took me quite a while to plan it out, which I can describe in another video. Also, let me show you the more advanced thirds breakdown on a page-by-page basis here. And you can see that Sarah is located and sort of constrained within this upper left section. The text and basically on the bottom left and on the upper right of this page roughly fall in alignment with the intersections. On the right side of the spread, once again, Sarah's face close up is in the upper left, and her full body shot down here is in the lower right. And you'll notice that the pillar is pointed at her, which helps keep the eye constrained and pointing down toward this area. Once again, same with the text. This text is within this intersection, and this text is within this intersection. So the rule of thirds, it's a very, very useful technique that will almost universally guarantee that you will have an effective composition. It's very simple to use. You just need to consider breaking up your images into these 9 sections and try putting your focal points within any one of these intersections. And mind you, this doesn't have to just be for these more advanced compositions. This could be just a drawing of a character. Even if there was nothing else in the image, maybe put the character's head behind one of these intersections. And even if the rest of it is just a white space and you only have a character description, you should still consider trying the rule of thirds. And, of course, you can put things in the center. You can work with symmetrical compositions. One of my favorite directors, Stanley Kubrick, loved to use symmetrical designs where you had a focal point right in the center of the image. And I think that's very effective. And there are certain images within Dreamside that use the symmetrical composition. So again, this is not a rule. I don't really like that term within the art world, but it is something that has been proven to work. So as you move forward and improve as artists, you want to make sure that composition is a big part of your focus. Okay, so that's it for today. For some of you, of course, this is rudimentary information, and for some of you, this is brand new information. So if you find it useful, please let me know. I hope you have a great art-filled weekend. For those of you who have some free time coming up, you can reach me on my website at www.dmcumbo.com and go to my contact page and send me messages that way. I love to hear from people who are fans of Dreamside and are following my progress, and share your own for your own projects. It's very inspirational and motivational to speak with other artists and learn about what is on your minds and what you're trying to create. So thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.